Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Secular Scriptures. Today, we are cherry picking. Quite literally, because my cherries are ripe and they need to be picked. But we're also going to talk about a thing called cherry picking. When you are picking cherries, especially the kind I have that are organic and small and have not been sprayed to death with various things you probably don't want to be eating in the first place, you have to be selective about what cherries you pick. Not every cherry on a tree is going to be yummy. And the scriptures in the Bible are the same way. So not every verse in the Bible or chapter or book or whatever is going to be appropriate. Everything applies everywhere, all the time, to all people, everywhere. That's not how that works. So, various denominations are obligated to do what we call cherry picking. And depending on the theology that you want to promote, you're going to choose different verses to get your point across. Ooh, that's a rotten one. Not so good there. We're going to throw that one out. Yuck. Now, some of these are going to be rotten. Some of them are going to be a bit moldy. We don't want those. Some of them might be a little small. We don't want those. Some of them are going to be nice and juicy and perfect. We keep those. Over the centuries, people have chosen different verses and different ideas to pull from the Bible to build their life around. And other religions do the same thing with their texts and traditions. Because the truth is, you just can't take everything and mash it all together and have a coherent narrative. Here's another thing. You can't always reach everything without a little help from a ladder. So the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff, that's what most people are going to pick. It takes a little bit more effort to get to the higher stuff. So this analogy carries through no matter what religion you're dealing with. But most people who follow the Christian religion will never read more than what, well, hello, possum, will never read more than what they're assigned in Sunday school. They get a selection of verses, that's what they're familiar with, that's what they're going to stick with, okay? They have little sayings, they have little verses that they live their life by, and you know what? If it works for them, that is totally cool. It's fine. Other people, like me, really want to dig into the stories. I want to know who these characters were. I want to know what their motivations were. I want to know the areas that they were in. I want to know the timelines they were on, okay, because they don't make sense. And the thing is that the text has absolutely no obligation to make sense. Why, when we're picking cherries, do you have one that's moldy, one that's rotten, one that has a bug on it, and then two that are absolutely delicious right next to each other? Okay, do you see how this analogy actually works? Sometimes you have to bring a branch down to be able to reach it. Sometimes you have to bring a ladder over to be able to reach what you want. Sometimes you're going to throw things away. Ooh, like this one. Yuck. Blech. Things like Abram married his half-sister. Kind of yuck, right? Oop, kitty fight. We wouldn't do that today. And they actually outlaw it later on in the book. You can't do that anymore. But again, there's absolutely no evidence that the people from the time that the story is talking about actually practiced close kin marriage. It just wasn't a thing. So we know that the story itself is factually incorrect from the DNA evidence. But that does not mean that the story is not valuable. There was a channel, like biblical commentary, apologetics. He's a big apologetics person. And he was talking about the arguments for God, like the logical arguments for God. So, all right, here's our bowl, right? So we've got, sometimes you have to sort through afterwards because you don't see them right away. Yuck. And as I do this, I sort of sort through and reassess because I know the things I picked up that looked good immediately aren't always. So you gotta throw those out. Nope, that one's no good. You don't want to jiggle them around too much, they'll get bruised. That's actually not bad. Now, main thing here, you want to make sure your ladder is stable. So, you need a firm foundation before you start climbing up, right? Or you might fall down. This is an analogy for the people who go in to a Bible study with an unfirm foundation or a poor foundation. And what's going to happen is that as they climb higher to reach those wonderful cherries, they're going to fall over and get hurt. They're going to lose their faith. This is what happened to me largely. I was a very curious child. I was very into taking things in context. I was a very literal child, a very literary child. And I did not have someone who had the ability to explain to a very smart, very literal, very context-oriented tiny human that what they were reading was not to be taken literally, that it was symbolic. Symbolism is a very valuable thing. It's very important. But if you take everything literally as written, there's so many contradictions that you lose your faith. So, firm foundation before you crawl up. You're not going to get this in your evangelical churches. I'll tell you why. By saying things like, God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good, that the Bible is literal truth in every word, blah, 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 blah. If you're familiar with evangelicalism, you know what I'm talking about. You're setting people up who think about things to exit your religion real fast. Do I regret exiting Christianity? No, I don't. I love the stories. I'm very comfortable with the stories. I do not, gross. I do not regret leaving one bit. The camera here. All right, back to this apologetics pastor. That one's rotten. So he had the typical arguments for God while addressing atheists / non-believers, that type of thing. That one's gross. And an invitation at the end of his video for the people who he's addressing to respond. And I am not certain if that was a genuine invitation or not, but I took him up on it. And I responded to all of the arguments and what I thought of them. Now, the person who replied to me said something along the lines of, you have to already be a believer to study the Bible. My apologies for your headache there. Prince, you're out. How doing there, bud? You went right over that fence like it was nothing. The Bible is for everyone, whether you believe it or not. Does not matter. That one's gross. Quack, quack. That's what the ducky says. I don't know if you should be eating cherries, my bud. But you can certainly chase the kitties. My duck's favorite pastime is chasing kitties. Nope. So the original video was the arguments for God. And some of them were pretty decent and some of them were kind of crappy. I don't think that you can prove God or disprove God. I think we have to wait till we die to find out. Therefore, the arguments for or against God are all moot. But I think it's silly to argue over it. So, taking a look at the character who is God in the Bible. This is not an omni-God. This is a God of limited attention, limited power, who is good and bad. He says so himself. So obviously he's not all good. But the thing is that to have a lasting religion, people do have to choose what they want. You know, what do you want out of your God? There's nothing wrong with cherry picking. You throw out the rotten stuff and the moldy stuff and the stuff with the bugs, and you keep the good cherries. The stuff you can't reach, if you choose, you get a ladder. If you don't feel like climbing on a ladder, don't climb the ladder. Don't look any deeper if you're happy. If you are going to climb the ladder and you want to keep your faith, make sure that your ladder has a firm foundation. If you're an evangelical who's been brought up in apologetics, chances are your ladder does not have a firm foundation. It's got a shaky as hell foundation that's probably with one leg sitting over a deep hole, and you're going to land on your ass. We have to do a quality control check here. We've gotten a little bit farther in our cherry picking. That one's got mildewsies on it. We don't like to eat the mildewsies or the rottenies. Just as I am examining my lovely bowl of cherries and looking through for anything that has bugs or bruises or whatever as I go, you should do the same with your religious beliefs. Take a look at them every once in a while. See how they're doing. See what's rotten. See what needs to be thrown out. Oh, that one's no good. Okay? And it's fine to do that. There's nothing wrong with it. Hello, fox. There's possum. Gratuitous cat shots. More cats. The kitty nemesis. Well, are you going to come get them, or are you going to stay over there because I'm here? No, we're going to pretend we're not doing anything wrong. We were doing a sneak attack. Now we're pretending to eat grass. We aren't doing anything bad. We're just over here eating grass. No chasing of kitties at all, at all. Alright, so back to our friend who asked these questions about the arguments for God and wanting feedback on them. If you don't want to know why people have left a religion, don't ask. okay? If you're doing this just to make your followers, like your fellow believers, be like, oh, haha, we're better than those other people, it's not a good showing for you. It's really not a good look. If you actually want to have a dialogue, find out why people are leaving Christianity in droves, and why your arguments for God are kind of crappy, to be honest, then come into the conversation sincerely. Because when somebody says that argument for God isn't good, that is not an attack on your faith, that is a commentary and an analysis of the argument that you have used, which may be a fine argument from the perspective of somebody who's a believer, but it's a crappy argument from the perspective of somebody who is left. And if you want to start retaining people, you got to start listening to why people are leaving. Well, if you didn't want to get tweaked by the duck, you shouldn't have been in his yard. Another quality control check here. I think we're okay, but things like being anti-gay, anti-trans, things like being racist, things like massive amounts of sexism. These are all going to lose people for you. They're rotten. Okay? They don't follow the notion of love. They just don't. There's a saying, ain't no hate like Christian love. And it's true. And people leave. And they don't have to be a woman or gay or have dark skin to exit stage left on this religion. They can just say, hey, you're telling me as a kid that I'm supposed to love everybody. And then in the same breath, you're telling me to hate these people over here and that they deserve to die. That's what my church said. My advice, as somebody who left Christianity before I was 10, is that you stop saying that everything in the Bible is true. Because if somebody ever actually bothers to read the thing, they're going to see the contradictions, that these several things cannot possibly be true together. So stop saying that, because it's dumb and it's wrong. Explain that these are stories and that they can be taken as allegory and symbolism, and that literal truth is not necessary for these stories. It's not necessary for them to line up with the archaeology or the genetics, that as historical fiction, they have as much value as modern fiction does. I mean, I love Terry Pratchett. And there's a lot of truth in Terry Pratchett, but it takes place on a flat world on the back of 4 giant elephants floating through space on a giant sea turtle. It's absolutely preposterous, okay? But there's a lot of truth in it. There's a lot of good things in there. And I think if you can bring yourself to do that with the biblical narratives, that you are going to potentially have a much healthier relationship with these texts and with the world around you. I doubt anybody who's in the religious position is going to take my advice there, but that's my advice, and it's sincere. So I want to thank you for joining me on my cherry-picking episode of the Secular Scriptures, and hopefully we could actually hear this because the wind is kicking up and I need to call it quits. Cherry-pick the hell out of your Bible, okay? Don't take every single passage from this book and think you can eat it, because you can't. That's not how it works. Take what's good, throw out what's rotten, moldy, has bird shit on it. Nope, that one's got a wormhole. All right, I think that looks good.